What's your most chilling story that you can't explain? Story 1. My husband and I recently took a trip to Wimberley, Texas, and stayed at an Airbnb that was tucked away in the woods, about half a mile off the main road. It was peaceful and beautiful, surrounded by trees, and everything felt totally normal the first 2 days. But on the third night, something strange happened. Around 1:30 a.m., the TV suddenly turned on by itself and started playing a cooking channel. My husband turned it off, and we kind of brushed it off as a glitch. The next evening, which was supposed to be our last night there, we got back from dinner around 6:45. My husband went to bed, and I decided to soak in the hot tub and watch the sunset one last time. At first it was relaxing, but about 15 minutes in, all the birds and bugs suddenly went completely silent. I got this intense, sinking feeling in my stomach, like something was watching me, even though I couldn't see anything. Then this overwhelming sense of fear hit me. Like if we stayed the night, something really bad was going to happen. I packed up as fast as I could and begged my husband to leave. Thankfully, he agreed and we drove out that night. I've never believed in anything paranormal, but I can't stop thinking about that night. Has anyone experienced anything similar in Wimberley or at a cabin in the woods like this? I'd really like to hear your thoughts. This feeling hasn't left me since. Story 2. My grandfather has been seeing shadows continuously for the past 9 to 10 days, and I'm concerned. My grandpa is 70 years old. He's been living alone since my grandma passed away in 2007. He was diagnosed with TB when he was around 40, so it's not something new, but he does his best to stay healthy. He practices yoga, goes for walks, and tries to keep active. He has no known history of mental health issues either. For the past 2 weeks, though, he's been quite unwell. My dad took him to the doctor for checkups, but nothing major came up, just general weakness and some breathing difficulties, which were already an ongoing concern. He isn't eating much and doesn't want to leave the bed very often. Things got serious 10 days ago when my dad received a call from him at around 3 a.m. He told Dad that he had fallen and injured his shoulder. Dad rushed over and took him to the hospital, from which they returned an hour later. He had a bruise. The same thing happened again 4 days ago. He fell the same way. Mom and Dad asked him to move in with us so we can take care of him until he's in better condition, but he declined. The most concerning part happened yesterday. He told my mom that he's been seeing black shadows coming out of my grandma's photo. He said there are multiple shadows and among them is a man. I'm stressed because Mom told me the same thing happened to her sister, who passed away in 2018. She had also seen similar shadows before her death. I don't know if this is some kind of sign, a health-related issue, or something else entirely. Story 3. Not my personal encounter, but my brother's. We live right on the Chattahoochee and about 4 miles from Lake Lanier, known as the most haunted lake in the USA. The woods around that area are undeniably eerie. Sometimes you get this oppressive, you are being watched and it's not friendly kind of feeling. I used to spend time out there, and the overwhelming sense of dread would sometimes follow me until I got out of the woods and back in my car. I've even felt it during the day and heard things I can't describe. It's the kind of fear that makes the birds go quiet, silences the bugs, and makes the trees feel still. There's even a patch of woods in my neighborhood that I won't go into anymore because of that same unsettling presence. I haven't seen anything myself, but I've definitely felt and heard enough to stay cautious. My brother and his friend, on the other hand, actually saw something. They were out in the woods on the banks of the Chattahoochee, this small, secluded ledge of mud and trees just off a walking trail where the dirt dips toward the river. It was around midnight, maybe close to 1 a.m. At first, they heard the usual forest sounds, but then they started hearing footsteps moving around and began talking about it. They tried to make sense of it, and one of them said out loud, "That's got to be a deer." Apparently, whatever was nearby didn't appreciate the comparison. It reacted. My brother and his friends suddenly felt that same heavy, unsettling presence I've experienced before, and when they turned around, they saw it, a shadowy figure, around 9 feet tall, standing at the top of the dip, with glowing white eyes staring down at them. Neither of them said a word. They didn't even look at each other. They just scrambled up the side of the dip and ran as fast as they could to their car. I've been to that same spot by the river many times. I actually went there recently during the day, and I heard something so strange it made me run from my car. My brother was already inside about 1,500 feet away, and he heard it too. The sound was something like an organic chainsaw mixed with a high-pitched bird. I had forgotten my bag, which had the keys to the car. I grabbed it as fast as I could and just ran. The sound followed me like it was chasing me. I'm familiar with most bird calls and forest sounds out there, but this didn't sound like anything I've ever heard before. Even the road leading there feels wrong. My brother and the same friend were driving on it one night with the floodlights on when they saw something, again about 9 feet tall, humanoid, peek out from behind a tree and watch them as they drove by. My brother has a small fort built in those woods. Just last week, I went there at night with him and a few friends. As we arrived, he made a speech about how nothing ever crosses the fence the fort is built up against. It almost felt like he was daring whatever's out there to come through. We all begged him to stop. That kind of energy wasn't helpful, especially considering the mindset we were in. My gut tells me this won't be the last experience we have out there. Story 4. So I recently decided to get an aventurine pendulum from one of the local spiritual shops in my city. I went through all the programming, figuring out what yes, no, and maybe meant with it, and I cleansed the stone with sage. I'd had it for a couple of days, and tonight I decided to use it at my friend's place. I was asking questions, trying to understand what was controlling it. I asked if it was my intuition, and it said yes. I asked if spirits sometimes manipulate my pendulum, and it also said yes. It confirmed that familial spirits are sometimes with me, and also said yes to other beings that weren't related to me. When I asked if those other spirits had ever been human, it said no. That part kind of unsettled me. I asked my friend if he had any questions, and one of them was, "Is my grandmother here right now?" The pendulum responded with a no, but it did say yes to her being with him sometimes, and yes that he could send messages to her if he wanted. I asked if we could talk to her, and he said her name. When I asked again if she was there, it said yes. I asked if she was comfortable with what we were doing, and the pendulum went counterclockwise, indicating no. We figured out it was because she was religious. Christian? I asked if she could leave if she wanted to, and it swung yes. Then the lamp in the room made a cracking sound as it flickered, which I'd never seen it do before. And my friend said he saw the couch cushions sink slightly at the same time. I felt shivers all up my left side. I used the pendulum to ask for protection for myself and everyone in the apartment, and it swung yes. I burned some sage around the pendulum, around our space, around me and my friend, and ended the session. When I went home and walked through the parking lot, I didn't see anyone. But about 20 steps before reaching the door, I heard whistling, and weirdly enough, it sounded like the whistle notes from Rue and Katniss in the Hunger Games. I looked around and checked every balcony to see if someone was there, but I didn't see anyone. It stopped me in my tracks, and I said out loud, "Well, that's creepy," and went inside. Now I'm writing this. Not very well, probably. I'm not sure if I didn't cleanse myself properly or if a neighbor was messing with me, because it seems odd that a spirit or entity would know the Hunger Games whistle tone. I also feel kind of guilty for trying to call on my friend's grandma, since she didn't seem comfortable with it, and I hope burning sage afterward wasn't offensive if she was still there. I'm not particularly scared of things like this, as I believe I'm in control and protected. I can't say for sure if maybe I'm subconsciously moving the pendulum or if it's some kind of energy field, but I just found the situation strange. I don't claim to be any kind of powerful practitioner, but I like to explore tarot and animal spirit cards and would consider myself open-minded. I'm just hoping I'm being safe and wondering if anyone has any thoughts or advice. Story 5. When I was around 14 or 16 years old, I used to pace my backyard at night to blow off steam from school and life. I'd put on some music full blast and walk back and forth. I remember starting at 10 p.m. and going back inside around 1 a.m. For context, my bedroom window faces out to the backyard, and if the blind is up, you can see straight into my room from outside. One night, I was doing my usual pacing. It was pitch black outside except for the light coming from my bedroom window. I remember pulling out my phone to change the song, and as I went to put it back in my pocket, I got this overwhelming feeling that I was being watched. I tried to shake it off, thinking maybe it was just my mind playing tricks on me because it was dark out. So I kept pacing. A few minutes later, I reached for my phone again to change the song, but before I even looked down, my eyes were drawn to my bedroom window. There was a tall, skinny black figure standing there. It had no features, but I could feel that it was watching me. I quickly changed the song and looked back up, just in time to see the figure walk out of my bedroom door like it was a person. I was home alone that night. Story 6. My parents and I were talking about things in general last night, and that's when my mom brought up a memory I had completely forgotten about. I'm not sure what to think of it, but here goes. When I was around 6 or 7 years old, my family took a trip to a place in India. We visited old palaces and saw many things, though I don't really remember much of it. What we all clearly remembered, though, was that after visiting one particular palace, 6 members of my family got sick, vomiting, earaches, and they didn't get better until we left that city. Nothing strange happened to me until we got back home. That's when I started hearing things. But my parents didn't take me seriously, and I don't blame them. I probably wouldn't have either. One afternoon, while taking a nap at my grandparents' house, I woke up to see my parents standing at the foot of my bed. I was confused because they weren't supposed to be back until later that night. Only my uncle and I were supposed to be home. They stood there saying something I couldn't understand. It sounded like gibberish. Then my grandpa started screaming at the top of his lungs, and my grandma started screaming too. It felt like they were fighting. I started screaming myself, and my uncle rushed into the room. Of course, there was nothing there. All he saw was his 7-year-old niece crying. I don't really remember what happened after that, but my parents told me I kept complaining about seeing and hearing things for about a week. They took me to the doctor, and my grandmother, who was very religious, also took me to a temple. I can't remember exactly how or when it stopped, but the doctors said I was completely fine. Maybe it was some kind of delusion, but after reading a lot of stories like this lately, I can't help but wonder if it was something else entirely. Story 7. I was staying with my partner at the time, we'll call him Steve, and we were sleeping in his parents' basement in a country home on the edge of town. I sometimes had trouble falling asleep, so Steve had taken me out for a car ride to help me relax. When we got home, I was still wide awake, lying in bed around 3 a.m., waiting for Steve to come back from the washroom. All of the lights were off in our room, but the door was left open to the main part of the basement where the light was on. I heard shuffling and looked up, thinking it was Steve walking toward me, except he was moving at a slow, eerie pace. He appeared as a dark, shadowy figure, which I assumed was because he was backlit by the light in the main basement area. He made it about halfway across the room, moving steadily toward the bed, completely silent. "Steve?" I asked. Silence. "Steve?" Still nothing. I blinked, trying to get rid of the shadow, but it was still there. It kept moving toward me. "Steve!" I said more frantically. Still no response. Then I heard the toilet flush, and the shadow figure suddenly ducked into the laundry room, which was near the entrance to our room. A moment later, Steve came out of the washroom. I refused to leave the bed until he checked the entire basement, especially the laundry room, but he found nothing. Needless to say, I did not sleep that night. Story 8. This comes from when I was little. So sorry if the details aren't that clear. My mom and stepdad at the time bought a very old house that had belonged to previous hoarders. It was built before the Titanic era, that old. After fixing it up enough to live in, my siblings and I had our own rooms. I was around 8 to 10 years old at the time, while my siblings were toddlers. When I first got there, I started having horrible nightmares. I'd be stuck in them even when I knew I was dreaming. Then one night, after waking up from one of those dreams, I saw a girl standing on the floor, looking up at me. I had a bunk bed. Her eyes were peeking through the bar, and of course, at my age, this scared me to my core. But I don't remember screaming or freaking out, just being frozen against the wall. After a bit, she disappeared. I don't really remember how or if she just vanished, but I didn't sleep that night. A couple of days later, I saw her again, but this time, she was hanging from one of the beams on the ceiling. The house was still unfinished. Her lower body looked purple, and she wore a simple white gown. I remember her hair the most. It was black but didn't look normal. It was matted and jagged, like a terrible haircut. She was swaying slightly and then, like before, she disappeared. I was hysterical and ran crying to my mom, but she didn't really respond, probably thinking they were just nightmares again. These were the most vivid encounters, but she'd show up regularly, ironically right after I had nightmares. She never spoke and barely moved. just stared or was frozen in whatever position. As soon as I got a different room, I never saw her again. But I still can't forget the day I saw her eyes staring straight into me. As dramatic as it sounds, I felt like I was in a horror movie. I just hope I never see her again. Story 9. It doesn't matter what time of day or night I go someplace. I can walk in the door and there's not a single person at the register waiting to check out. There are hardly any cars in the parking lot. And yet, by the time I get to the checkout counter, there's a huge line, sometimes stretching all the way to the back of the store, and they have to call for more cashiers. It doesn't necessarily cause issues for me, since sometimes people get in front of me and sometimes they show up behind me. But it's always the same. No one at the registers until I get there. I work odd hours, so I try to avoid crowds and traffic. I'll go to a grocery store or other retail stores during the week, around 10 a.m. or 1 p.m., and this weird phenomenon still happens. It happened again today at a grocery store. And it's not just grocery stores. It happens at restaurants, hotel desks, hotel pools, and even hospital greeting desks. Even my kids and friends have started noticing it around me. I feel like there has to be some kind of metaphysical explanation, and I'm hoping someone here knows or can share insight. I'm also curious if anyone else experiences this. If this is some sort of simulation, are those people what's considered NPCs? Today's incident was especially strange because it happened in two different grocery stores and took an even weirder turn. At the second store, I just ran in to grab two items. As I was quickly moving through the aisles to find them, trying not to be late for an appointment, I noticed a woman. Her clothing choice stood out to me, and I wondered, is that what passes for fashionable corporate wear now? She had a shopping cart full of items, and I had no cart or basket, just needed two things. I ran into her at least 3 times in the narrow aisles. It started getting annoying because she always seemed to be in my way. For example, when I was looking for a razor in the personal items aisle, which I never buy at grocery stores because of the prices, she showed up again, right in front of the area I was trying to check. I don't usually shop at this store, so I didn't know where anything was. Eventually, I checked out and went to my car. As I walked outside, I saw her walking to hers, which struck me as odd because she had way more items than I did, and I expected her to still be shopping. When I noticed her, she made eye contact with me and got into her car, parked directly behind mine. Story 10. A few years ago, I lived at my grandmother's house with my parents and my sister. My dad had bought a set of mirrors because we were planning to move. I should clarify that in that house, we were so accustomed to the paranormal that even watching horror movies wasn't allowed, because as soon as we did, strange things would start happening. At that time, I was very obsessed with my appearance because I was being bullied at school. So every morning before going to school, I would spend a few minutes in front of a pocket mirror. The thing is, in the mirror set, there was a medium-sized mirror with a stand. It became my favorite. It made it easier for me to see myself and fix my appearance. Just a quiet week passed, but then one night around 1 a.m., I couldn't sleep. Not because I was scared or anything, I just couldn't fall asleep, like a weird kind of insomnia. That same night, someone opened the door to my room. The doorknob literally turned slowly, and then the creaking of the door echoed through the room. I wasn't scared because I was used to these things happening, but what I didn't know was that worse things were coming. The next day, just as I was about to fall asleep, someone touched my shoulder and whispered my name into my ear. I quickly turned around, and there was no one there. It couldn't have been a family member. I always kept my door locked, and I would have heard someone come in. That night, every time I fell asleep, there was another touch on my shoulder, another whisper, over and over again. Even when I covered myself with my blanket, I still felt the touch through it. As time went on, things got more aggressive, to the point of objects being thrown off shelves, my hair being pulled, and more. That's when my mom told me to start saying prayers. I did, and things did calm down, but only for a short while. Gradually, the prayers seemed to lose their protection, so to speak. The disturbances returned, only this time, they were more intense, as if something had been angered. Sometimes I dreamed about it. It was a tall black figure, like smoke. My mom even dreamed of it too, and she told me that it had said something about me. Eventually, my mom figured out it was the mirror. She told me to cover it or turn it over before bed. That worked, for a while. But the strange part was that every morning, the mirror would be uncovered and face up, no matter what we did. The last time it attacked, it was the most intense. Like always, it wouldn't let me sleep. Then out of nowhere, it dragged me by my feet, almost out of bed. I say almost because I was able to grab onto something and hold on, but it kept pulling at my feet. I was terrified. Eventually it let go, and then started throwing my things everywhere, like some kind of tantrum for not being able to take me. The next day, after my mom blocked the mirror, we found it shattered. It hadn't fallen or anything. It was just broken. Story 11. I was watching some horror videos about ghosts, spirits, and similar things, when I suddenly remembered an experience I had. It happened 2 years ago when I was 14. My parents were invited to one of my cousin's birthday parties, and I chose to go with them. I don't remember the exact time we arrived, but it was sometime during the afternoon, around 3 or 4 p.m. Everyone was enjoying the party. The house is big and can hold a lot of guests, so it was lively. At one point, my aunt asked me to get the mop from the laundry room because one of her cats had thrown up in the kitchen. I wanted to be helpful, so I said okay and left the dining room where everyone was eating and drinking to head down the long corridor that led to the laundry room. As I was returning with the mop, I passed by the bathroom along the corridor and noticed something really strange. There was a woman sitting on the toilet, covering her face with her hands and looking down at the floor, like she was crying. I couldn't see her clearly because of how dark it was, but I noticed she was very thin, had long, wet black hair, and unusually pale skin. She was also completely unclothed. At first, I thought it might be someone from the party who had gone to the bathroom without me realizing, so I ignored it. But when I looked toward the dining room, I saw that everyone who was invited was still there. No one was missing. I turned back toward the bathroom and the mysterious woman had disappeared, like she was never there at all. I was scared and in shock, but I returned to the dining room with the mop and didn't tell anyone until 2 or 4 days later. That was pretty much it. I remember being terrified when it happened. It was my first ever paranormal experience. But now I'm just curious. What do you all think? Is seeing a ghost or spirit a bad thing? Should I have tried speaking to her? I'd really appreciate hearing your opinions. I drew this picture for a better understanding. A few things I want to mention. The house is very old. From what I know, my aunt had it built there, so it didn't belong to anyone before. When I said I only told one other person days later, I meant I told my dad, my aunt's brother. And when I asked him if he'd ever had strange experiences in that house, he said yes. That definitely makes me believe the house has something going on. My family has a history with the paranormal. According to stories from all of her grandchildren, my great-grandmother, my dad's grandmother, used to see and communicate with spirits. Story 12. I stumbled upon this forum the other day, and it got me thinking about my own experiences. I don't usually spend time thinking about ghosts or the paranormal, but I've had a few strange things happen, and this was undoubtedly the most terrifying. I was probably 16 or 17 at the time. Back then, I was a runaway and staying with friends. One night, I had been out on a date, and when I returned to my friend's house, I realized it was very late and all the lights were off. I didn't want to wake her parents, so I decided to stay in the trailer next door. It belonged to her uncle, and I knew he was out of town. I was tired, so I went straight to bed. A few minutes later, I heard heavy footsteps. I assumed her uncle had come home early. I called out his name and explained why I was there. No response, but I kept hearing the footsteps. Then I heard the sound of boots hitting the floor, like someone taking off heavy construction boots. I called his name again. Still nothing. Now I was feeling uneasy. I said into the darkness, "Hey, Russ, I know it's you." Stop trying to scare me. It was quiet, very dark. Then I felt someone getting into bed with me. I could feel the mattress sink under the weight. I could sense a presence. I tensed up, completely paralyzed by fear. I could hear my heart pounding, but I couldn't move or speak. For the next several hours, I lay completely stiff, eyes wide open, knowing that someone or something was lying in bed with me. I could feel their breath. I could feel the mattress shift and move. Finally, I saw a hint of daylight in the pitch-black room. I gathered enough courage to glance at the bed. There was an indentation in the mattress where someone had been lying. I stayed still for another 30 or 40 minutes, trying to decide what to do. I made a plan in my head. Grab my shoes, grab my purse, and run for the door, which is exactly what I did. But it doesn't end there. I went next door and my friend was in the living room. The first thing she said was, "My mom is upset. What were you doing all night?" She said you were standing at the back window for hours, staring into her bedroom and flickering the light. She knew it was you because your car was there. I started shaking and crying. I told her I never went down the hall or near that window. When her mom came into the room, I explained the entire story. She apologized for thinking it was me, and then told me about her own strange experiences in that trailer. After that, I went into my friend's bedroom and passed out from exhaustion. Story 13. One day I came home from school and started watching South Park, the episode where Cartman befriends Cthulhu. I was about halfway through the episode when I suddenly fell asleep on the couch. A couple of hours later, I woke up very thirsty, got up, and went to drink some water. But in the blink of an eye, I woke up again in the armchair, with that strange falling sensation you get in dreams. I laughed to myself. It felt funny to dream that I had woken up. I looked at the time and got up again. This time, I turned on the TV. Then in another blink, I was back in the armchair again. That's when it started to feel strange. I stood up for the third time and went to the bathroom to look in the mirror, only to wake up in the armchair again. By the fourth time, I was worried. I started blinking several times before standing up. I looked out the window and noticed there was no one on the street. About 2 minutes passed before I woke up for the fifth time. Now I was truly confused. I wondered if I was having bad luck or if it was something more. During this fifth wake up, I got up cautiously, blinking over and over. I went to the bathroom, washed my face, and this time nothing strange happened. Everything seemed normal. Then I realized that during all the previous times, before I broke out of this loop, to call it something, everything had been too quiet. Normally, my neighbors make a lot of noise, but during those moments, it felt like there was no one on the entire block. I remained uneasy until nightfall when my parents finally got home. That whole week, I was afraid to blink too much, scared I'd wake up again in that same armchair. Story 14. I feel like I'm cursed. Let me explain. One day I was at school and I randomly started thinking about a car crash. Later that day, one of my brother's friends got into a car crash. Another time, I was thinking about a car crash again, and that same day it happened to my mom. For context, I was a sophomore in high school and had just transferred to a new school. The only person I knew was my brother, and he let me sit with him and his friends, so I became close to them. I've always been extremely close to my mom, more than I am to my dad. I also have a few disabilities, including Asperger's, Tourette's, ADHD, OCD, anxiety, dysgraphia, and as of early 2023, depression, triggered by the deaths of two of my friends. Back in middle school, I met a kid named Shane. We became very close, and during lunch, we'd sit in a quiet room so we didn't have to deal with overstimulation. Shane had a feeding tube the whole time I knew him, and on the last day of school, I chose to sit in the regular lunchroom while he stayed in the quiet room. I didn't know it would be the last time I'd see him. Later in high school, I reconnected with another friend, Will. I hadn't seen him since elementary school because we went to different middle schools. When I saw him again in high school, he had a crowd around him, and I didn't want to bother him, so I didn't say anything. After Christmas break, I found out he had passed away, just moments after I had made a joke about wanting to harm myself. Not long after, I learned that Shane was on hospice care. He passed away at the end of 2022 or the beginning of 2023. I've carried a lot of guilt and confusion since then. I don't know what to make of these connections or whether they mean anything, but it's hard not to feel like something's off. Story 15. Some backstory. The house I lived in was built around 2000. It was a 3-bedroom, 2.5 bathroom home with a finished basement. My parents bought it and rented it out to me, and no, they didn't give me a family discount on rent. I was in a weird place in life at the time, especially with work, so I wanted a place where I could break the lease at any time without penalty. My parents also wanted a place to stay when they traveled near my area. Flash forward to when I moved in. I lived alone, which was nice, but the house was way too big for just me. I never went into the basement, even though it was finished and had my Lego collection. I had a guest room that sat empty except for a bed my parents bought. I mostly used the main bathroom, my bedroom for sleeping, my office for gaming, and the kitchen. Still, I never wore headphones while gaming, always rushed to my bedroom at night, and I always slept with the door closed and locked. I just felt uneasy. I had lived alone before, but something about this house felt off. I'd often hear thumps and bumps throughout the day and night, But I blamed it on neighbors. It was a duplex. But I never heard talking, TVs, or music. Just heavy thumping sounds like footsteps. About a year later, my girlfriend started staying over. Things were going great. She even helped me redecorate. But no matter what we did, the guest room, upstairs hallway, and basement always felt creepy. It was like someone was watching you. We tried to have a movie night in the basement once, but after 30 minutes we had to leave. The energy felt oppressive. My girlfriend even said it felt like something was grabbing her throat and making it hard to breathe. One night we fell asleep with the bedroom door wide open. That's when I had one of the most terrifying nightmares of my life. A tall, skeletal figure stood at the end of our bed, about 8 feet tall, its head nearly touching the ceiling. It was bone white, with long claws and large black sunken eyes that glowed red in the center. Its mouth was open, filled with sharp teeth. It had bat-like skeletal wings without skin. It just stood there, growling. I couldn't move, couldn't speak. I was frozen in fear. Eventually, I started screaming, but no sound came out. My girlfriend shook me awake. She said I had been convulsing and making strange noises in my sleep. I had that exact same nightmare at least 5 more times. It always happened when the bedroom door was open, even if it was only slightly. We tested it. My girlfriend once opened the door after I fell asleep without telling me. I had the nightmare that same night. After one of the nightmares, I woke up on my own and rolled over. That's when I saw a young woman standing beside the bed. She looked to be in her 20s, had blonde hair and a dark headband, and wore a white shirt with overalls. She wasn't looking at me. She was staring at the end of the bed, where the creature usually stood. When I fully woke up, she was gone. After that, we assumed she was the one we felt watching us. I would play my violin, and I'd feel eyes on me. I'd turn around and almost see someone dart around a corner. My girlfriend would fold laundry and catch glimpses of a woman out of the corner of her eye. She often heard bumps when I wasn't home. The last major thing that happened was before we moved out. I had a stomach bug, and my girlfriend had to work early. I moved to the guest room and left the door open in case I needed the bathroom. As I lay there curled in pain, I heard loud footsteps in the hallway. They came into the guest room. I felt the bed sink next to me, and then a hand on my back. But instead of fear, I felt calm. The hand rubbed my back gently, like it was reassuring me that everything would be okay. I slept through the night, door wide open, and had no nightmares. After that, whenever I caught a glimpse of the woman, I'd say, "Can you leave me alone for a bit?" And it worked. I think she liked watching us and didn't like seeing us suffer. I don't know what that skeletal creature was, but I think it brought darkness with it, and she was afraid of it too. A psychic friend came over once when we had a party and didn't sense anything. But later, when it was just us, she said, "It's upstairs outside your room. Now it's in the basement. I don't like it." She also said she saw a woman with blonde hair and a headband, details I had never shared. It's been over a year since we moved, and we haven't experienced anything since. I still regret not trying to document it all. I'm sorry this story is so long. I never wrote it down before, and as I did, I kept remembering more. I'm probably still missing pieces. Feel free to ask me anything. Story 16. I grew up on a rancho farm, which basically meant I worked there too. If you know anything about family farms, you get it. Some background. My family owns the farm and the land that comes with it. And since back in the day, farms were settled in a way that often included homes on the land, when you bought the property, you'd also get a house. My family uses those houses to provide housing for employees as part of the benefits. At the time of this story, I was in my early 20s and still working on the farm. So I moved into one of the older houses to live on my own. And when I say older, I mean a very old house. The kind made of concrete bricks that's been there so long, no one remembers who originally lived there. It was already there when my grandma was young and working for the former owners, milking cows and bottle-raising heifers. I asked her if anyone had passed away in the house, and she said she never heard of anything like that. But the house has been in my family for generations, and several cousins and uncles have lived in it. More than one of them claimed it was haunted, though no one mentioned that to me before I moved in. At first, everything was fine. I had my dog with me and was enjoying the independence. Then one night, I heard a loud noise coming from the basement. It sounded like a whoosh, like a fire being put out suddenly, but deeper, heavier, like the sound had weight to it. The house vibrated a little, and my dog, who had been napping, perked up and looked around. I sat up on the couch looking toward the vents, since they all led to the basement. I thought maybe something was wrong with the heater, so I went down to check, but nothing seemed out of place. I figured it was just a quirk of living in an old house. But then the noise started happening regularly. Every time I went to check, nothing was wrong. Eventually, I started ignoring it. A buddy of mine came over a few times, and the first time he heard the noise at night, he jumped and asked, "What the hell was that?" I told him it had been happening for a while. I couldn't figure out what it was, and the basement seemed fine. He joked that my house was haunted and we laughed it off. The noise didn't bother me much after that, but I started noticing other things. Shadows darting past the kitchen doorway, only in the corner of my eye, while I was watching TV. They were fast, low to the ground, and always stayed in the dark parts of the house like the kitchen, bathroom, and entryway. At first I thought maybe it was mice, but there were no droppings and I never saw anything directly. It happened often enough that I just got used to it and chalked it up to tricks of the eye in a dark room. Other small things happened too. Things that gave me a moment of pause but weren't big enough to stress over. Like waking up to find my bedroom door slightly open when I was sure I'd closed it the night before. This happened more than once. I even made a point to check before bed, but in the morning it would still be cracked open. I'm a guy and sometimes I miss small details, especially when I'm focused on farm work, so I brushed it off. But eventually the energy in the house started to shift. The basement noise got louder, and I started feeling more on edge walking through the house in the dark. Even though I've always preferred the dark to having a bunch of lights on. Then came the night that really shook me. I had gone to bed as usual in total darkness. I've always had trouble sleeping, so I didn't think much of it when I couldn't fall asleep. But I'd never had sleep paralysis before. That night, I was woken up by the basement noise. It came from the vent next to my bed, and it was loud. I opened my eyes but couldn't move. I was lying on my back, head slightly turned left, so I could see most of the room. The door was slightly open, letting in a sliver of light from the living room. My heart was pounding, so hard I could feel and hear it in my head. I was instantly panicking, but I couldn't do anything. It felt like something awful was in the room with me. I tried to move, tried to scream, but nothing worked. Finally, I managed to lift my forearm very slowly. It took a long time just to bend my arm at the elbow. When it reached about 90 degrees, it was like breaking through a barrier. I shot straight up, gasping for air and looking around. Nothing was in the room, and eventually my heart rate came down. It felt like a panic attack in my sleep that paralyzed me. I got up, went to the living room, turned on the TV, and tried to sleep on the couch. But I didn't get much rest. I was deeply unsettled. I've since moved out of that house, and nothing like that has ever happened again. I later asked my grandma about the history of the house again, and she maintained that she'd never heard of anyone passing away there. But she did say that many people who lived there, including family, had claimed the house was haunted. I'm still not sure what happened, but I'd love to hear what others think. Story 17. I don't know how long this has been going on, but it's gradually gotten to the point where I feel deeply uncomfortable and honestly worried. Smells. I sometimes smell gas, even when there's no gas around. No one else can smell it but me, and it's such a strong scent that there's no way it would go unnoticed by others. It actively bothers me when I do smell it. It comes and goes, but there are certain places where I notice it more than others. Another recurring smell is what I can only describe as rotting flesh. I know that's an oddly specific and disturbing scent, but it hits me out of nowhere. It's awful, and it doesn't come from any visible source. Then just like that, it's gone. One location in particular seemed to have that smell more often. These scents are driving me up the wall. Dreams, sure, trouble sleeping. Sleeping at night just doesn't work for me anymore. Every time I try, I have bad or uncomfortable dreams. Every single time. Even worse, I occasionally experience night terrors that leave me terrified. I move around in my sleep while fully aware that I'm awake, kind of like in those Nightmare on Elm Street movies. It's a lot like that. I'll find myself walking around the house, panicked, checking a few rooms nearby like I'm searching for something. Recently, I've even been caught poking my head outside, staring into the dark, which is terrifying. I prefer sleeping during the day now because it feels safer. But even during the day, if I'm completely alone, it still doesn't feel right. I feel watched. It's unsettling. Weird things. Strange things happen every now and then, and I try to brush them off. Because honestly, what else am I supposed to do? One example. My dryer once started on its own. It was loud and obnoxious, but as soon as I walked around the corner to shut it off, it stopped. When I opened it, the inside wasn't even warm. It was cold, even though it had clearly been running for about 5 minutes. I feel so uncomfortable, disoriented, and confused. I'm not sure if I'm imagining all of this or if something's genuinely wrong. I just want these weird experiences to stop. Story 18. I'm going to describe some of my experiences in chronological order as best as I can. My name is Alan Pagach Barker. I won't offer any personal opinions, just the facts. You can decide for yourself what really happened. Odessa, Texas. I noticed two stars in the sky that seemed off. They didn't move at all over time, even as the sun set. Real stars shift position with the Earth's rotation, but these two did not. I used binoculars and then a telescope to get a closer look. A real star appeared as a shiny dot. These, however, looked like three dots arranged in a triangle. Not shiny, just glowing points of light. From a distance, you'd only see them as a single dot. They never moved, and eventually both slowly faded away. A few days later, around 3 a.m. to 3:30 a.m., something hovered over our house. I was asleep when my brother knocked on my door, waking me up. He said there was something above the house. He had seen a bright light that lit up the entire backyard, and he felt air pressure and a deep bass sound. My mom also woke up and saw the same thing. She had to work that day, so for her to be up at that time, something significant had clearly happened. She also noticed a large round shadow cast on the backyard fence. If the moon is out and something big is hovering, it will cast a shadow. The moment the object started to move, the light, bass, and pressure all stopped. Later that morning, I went back to sleep, strangely quickly considering the situation. That's out of character for me. I'm a night owl, and if someone had just told me a UFO was hovering above our house, I'd normally stay up. But I went back to sleep. We checked flight paths and confirmed there were no airplanes or helicopters scheduled to be flying overhead at that time. When I woke up again, I noticed three tiny marks on my right hand, on the knuckle of my middle finger. They looked like small, clean scabs, arranged in a perfect triangle. They went away after a week. But for 5 or 6 years afterward, anytime hot water touched that part of my hand, it would sting for a second. Then one day, the stinging just stopped, without warning or a gradual fade. Just gone. I've had other odd experiences that don't quite feel like UFO incidents, though they might be related somehow. Houston. Once I heard a voice in my right ear say, "Hey," but in a strange, drawn-out whisper, like, "Hey." It wasn't loud, but it got gradually stronger, and I was alone. At first, I thought it might have been the TV, but it was off. Nothing else could have made that sound, especially just in one ear. New Braunfels, Texas. My brother and I went tubing while my mother and grandfather stayed at the hotel. My grandfather received a photo on his phone, completely sepia-toned, of what looked like me. I was kneeling on some kind of square platform, surrounded by rushing water, looking up at the camera from above. It appeared to be an aerial shot, taken from a few yards up. But what made it strange is how the picture arrived. It took up his entire phone screen. That's not how regular messages or airdrops appear. When he tried to show my mom a few minutes later, the photo was gone. I've had many other experiences like this, things that would be classified as paranormal, but maybe they were something else. And yes, like many others, I wrote a short book about it all, with illustrations based on what I saw. I won't mention its name here. Story 19. I'm having trouble sleeping right now because earlier today I went into my garage and believe I may have encountered an entity from another spiritual plane. I went into the garage to get gloves for yard work. While rummaging through the crate to find the best pair, I suddenly heard a very loud slam as the garage door shut. Keep in mind, there was no breeze. It was a warm, calm evening in Texas, and this is a heavy, bolted wooden door. The door had been unlocked when I went inside, but when I tried to leave after the slam, it was suddenly locked. I tried calling my grandma, but the calls wouldn't go through. There was no one on the other side of the door. It's just my grandma and me here, and I'm currently taking care of her. Some background. This same garage is a separate part of the main house. It's rumored that someone either died or was murdered in that part of the house. We also had a family cat that was found dead in the garage. Something had fallen on him and crushed him badly. I'm very superstitious, and now I keep having these strange urges to go back to the garage. It's constantly on my mind, like I'm being drawn to it. After the incident, I went back to doing yard work, but I kept looking toward the garage window. I felt like something was watching me. Maybe it's paranoia, but the energy felt dark. I'm seriously considering going back in there with a chair and a Bible, just sitting and waiting to see if anything else happens. I've always been fascinated by death and spirits. An eerie but possibly unrelated event happened recently too, within 3 days. I encountered a poisonous snake on the stairs leading to my door. The entrance to my flat is near the garage. The snake had been watching me. When I saw it, I froze. It was about 5 feet away. We locked eyes for what felt like an eternity, and then it slithered away. An hour later, I was walking back to my flat when I suddenly froze again, sensing something. I looked to my left, and the same snake was there, this time at waist level due to the slope of the stairs. It was no more than a foot away. Again, we stared at each other, and then it slithered away. Is it just a weird coincidence? Possibly, but I'm not sure. Another side note, I recently went to a cemetery and sat next to a huge statue of Jesus. I cried. I don't even know why I went that day or why I broke down, but I had the urge to go. I've been recovering from a serious addiction to cocaine and meth that has consumed the last 5 years of my life. I guess I needed to let it all out. Did something follow me home from the cemetery? It's in the same neighborhood. A little more backstory. I got into a fight with a friend during a drug binge after he attacked me. I was arrested recently for a violent incident while working as a nightclub security guard. A man assaulted me, and I went too far defending myself. All of this may make it sound like my life is falling apart, but in reality, I have my dream job in medical device sales, and I'm preparing to compete in MMA again to make extra money. But now I'm wondering, if there is a spirit, is it trying to drag me back down? Please, I need advice. Logical, spiritual, metaphysical, anything. Passed down wisdom, wild theories. I want to hear all of it. I feel tempted to return to the garage, like something is calling me back. Should I go? I strangely want to face it. I've seen violence and even a little death, so I'm not easily scared. But maybe that's the problem. I have to go in that garage again anyway. But what if the spirit isn't hostile? What if it's friendly? Honestly, I want to validate whether the spirit world is real, for my own peace of mind. Please share your thoughts. I don't want to do something reckless, but I also don't want to ignore this pull I feel. Story 20. Back in my early teens when I lived near the small coastal town of Bandon, something strange happened one early morning that I've never forgotten. Our border collie started barking uncontrollably, which was unusual for her. She was a calm dog, rarely vocal like that. The barking woke up my entire family. My parents and older siblings went outside first to see what was going on. I followed close behind. We all saw what looked like a bobcat or some similar animal dart across the top of our driveway and disappear into the trees across the road. That led everyone to believe the dog was just reacting to the animal. Everyone else went back inside, but I stayed out for another minute or two. Something just felt off. Even at the time, I thought it was too quiet outside, which is strange considering we had just seen wildlife nearby. There were no birds, no wind, no ambient forest noise, just silence. Then I heard it, a bone-chilling noise, like a sharp, raspy gasp, as if someone were choking or gasping for air. It was loud, really loud, and yet, from what I later learned, no one inside the house heard it. It was coming from a small, abandoned in-law cabin that sat in a patch of trees near the house. The cabin was falling apart, full of rats, and we used it to store garbage until dump day. I already didn't like going near it. It always gave me the creeps. After hearing those gasps several times, I rushed back inside. I've tried to convince myself it could have been a wild animal, but I've never heard anything like that before or since, and I've never been able to match the sound to anything common in our area. Even now, all these years later, I can still vividly recall that noise. It's haunted me. I've started to believe that what I heard may have been something unnatural, maybe what people describe as the rake, based on other experiences I've read online. I don't know, but I've never gone near that cabin again. Story 21. When I was about 14 years old, my cousin, who was around 12 at the time, was spending the night with me. We were sitting on the couch in the living room, watching television around 2 in the morning, with all the lights off. The laundry room was right across from the living room, with a small hallway between the two. Suddenly, my cousin grabbed my leg and pinched me hard. She kept saying my name repeatedly, and finally she told me to look into the laundry room. I turned my head to look, and I froze. My mouth was hanging open, and I couldn't believe what I was seeing. I'll try my best to explain it. It looked like a shadow person, but the complete opposite. It had the full outline of a human body, but it was made entirely of bright white light. It was like staring at a bare light bulb. The figure didn't come toward us or move aggressively. It just floated there, shifting back and forth slightly. We probably sat there frozen for what felt like forever, though it was likely only a couple of minutes. Then my cousin grabbed my hand, pulled me off the couch, and we ran across the living room to turn on the lamp. When we walked back to where we could see the entrance to the laundry room, the figure was gone. I've had many strange experiences in that house, from childhood into my teen years and even adulthood. But this was the only time I've actually seen something physically manifest in front of me. I've always tried to explain it away. I've even asked my cousin multiple times if she remembered it, because part of me wondered if I made it up. But she definitely remembers. Was it a ghost? Something else? I honestly have no idea. Story 22. Years ago at our old house, my cousin and I were hanging out late one night. It was around 11 p.m., and the Sunday night football game had just ended. We decided to record ourselves sleeping, just out of curiosity. That's when things got weird. We turned on the camera. At the time, we were using one of those big RCA suitcase-style video cameras with a VHS tape. While a commercial was playing on TV, I started singing along. I got to a certain part in the song when suddenly there was a loud, deep growl or scream. No one heard it in the moment, not even me. By this time, it was around midnight. My parents were incredibly light sleepers. If they had heard even a whisper, they would have come into the room yelling at us. My cousin was sitting right next to me and didn't hear a thing. In fact, he just looked at me like, "Why are you screaming?" The next day, I asked my parents if they heard anything strange the night before. They said no. They didn't even go to bed until 1 a.m. and didn't hear me scream or anything unusual. So I rewound the tape all the way to the beginning and played it back. And there it was. Clear as day, the same deep, unexplainable growl or scream. Everyone heard it. To this day, we have no idea what it was or how it ended up on the recording. This is the first time I've asked for insight from others. Has anyone else experienced something like this? Story 23. I once drove to my friend's country house alone. The night was peaceful and calm. It's about a 2.5-hour drive, and to get there you have to take this really old off-map road. But it wasn't my first time going, so I wasn't feeling anxious or anything. Anyway, this time, about a minute after I turned onto that road, I got a strange feeling, like something was following me. I checked the rearview mirror because I couldn't shake it, but there was nothing there. I told myself it was probably just exhaustion since I had just finished my shift at work and had been on my feet all day. So I kept driving. About 5 minutes later, I saw a woman standing in the middle of the road. It was strange. There are no houses around there, and it's definitely not a road where you'd expect someone to go for an evening walk. I stopped, thinking maybe she was lost. I asked if she needed help. She told me she didn't remember how she got there, and I offered to drive her home since she said her house was near where I was headed. She got in, and I dropped her off at the house she pointed to. She thanked me, got out, and walked inside. I got to my friend's house and told him about her. He looked at me and said, "No one's lived in that house for years. The family that used to live there died in a car accident on that same off-map road." I thought he was joking because I had just dropped someone off there and saw her go inside. Later that night, I experienced sleep paralysis. I've had that before, so it didn't surprise me. But what happened next was anything but normal. It wasn't demons or shadows this time. It was the woman I had picked up. I saw her crawl up my bed, whispering things I couldn't understand. I was frozen, unable to move. She stood over me and touched my face. Her face was full of cuts and bruises, completely deformed. I finally broke out of it and woke up, feeling paranoid and anxious. The next day, I drove back to the house where I had dropped her off, and to my shock, the house looked completely abandoned. It clearly hadn't been lived in for years. I went online to search for any articles about the accident my friend mentioned, and I found it. There was even a photo of the woman. The accident had happened right where I picked her up the night before. To this day, I still get chills thinking about it. Story 24. My childhood home was seriously haunted. I had tons of experiences, and it felt like all the dark energy in that house focused directly on me. In my late teens, I started having night terrors and sleep paralysis so frequently that I began working night shifts just to avoid sleeping before sunrise. That was the only way I could avoid a bad night. But one night, on a rare day off, I was relaxing in bed watching TV and accidentally fell asleep well before sunrise. I was suddenly awakened by someone calling my name frantically and shaking me. When I opened my eyes, the room was pitch black. Somehow my TV had turned off, and standing next to me was a glowing woman with a concerned expression on her face. She wasn't standing on my bed. She was standing in it. Her legs went through the mattress as if she were standing on the floor beneath it. She looked right at me and said, "You have to wake up. He's coming." I couldn't move. Classic sleep paralysis. But this felt different. Most of my sleep paralysis episodes had been blurry, dark, and confusing, filled with indistinct shadows. But this was clear, sharp, and absolutely terrifying. I felt wide awake, but frozen in fear. She looked over at my bedroom door just as a black mass came through the closed door. In an instant, she shot toward it like a flash of white light. They collided, and I heard screaming and crashing, like two forces battling to the death. That was the last thing I remember before I blacked out again. When I woke up a few hours later, I was drenched in sweat, as if someone had thrown me into a swimming pool fully dressed. My heart was pounding like I had just run a marathon. Story 25. I moved into a new college house. The room was small and dingy, but that's expected where I'm from due to the housing crisis. Whatever. The first 2 nights I slept there, I cried until 7 a.m., and work usually started at 8:15. I couldn't figure out why I was so upset. For the next 2 weeks, I kept having nightmares about dead people in the room below me, dreams about being possessed. My partner stayed with me for 3 nights once, and he ended up getting sick for all 3. I couldn't sleep even when he was there. The estate was nice, and there were 5 other rooms in the house, but no one else reported anything strange. I was so scared I saged the room multiple times. I also used black tourmaline, but of course, it went missing. Even with my crystals, I couldn't fall asleep unless it was from sheer exhaustion, and I would always wake up choking, like I couldn't stop choking on air. I was so disturbed that I finally said, "I don't care what anyone thinks," and contacted the guy who lived there before me. He said he had to leave too, but didn't tell anyone else because he didn't want to be judged. He told me his mental health had declined, and no matter what he did, he couldn't feel okay in that room. He ended up moving home because he was suddenly dealing with depression. He also mentioned he'd often stay with friends just to avoid going back. I was terrified to close my eyes in that room. I wouldn't even dare to meditate there, which is odd considering how small the room was. You'd think that would make it feel safer, but it didn't. On the very last day I slept there, I fell asleep around 1 a.m. Then at 3 a.m., I woke up to a loud bang on the window. My room was upstairs and nothing could have hit that window. I was really tired and drifted back to sleep, only to be awoken again by screaming. I can't even describe the sound. It was like a woman, a dog, or some kind of animal. It happened 3 or 4 times and I was petrified. I actually caught it on video and still have a picture of the room. Because my friends lived there, I still went over occasionally to drink. One night I decided to stay over in someone else's room, but nothing changed. I still felt like I was being watched, even though someone was literally sleeping right beside me. Eventually I contacted a shaman, and they told me to get out of there because it would affect me. And it has, even to this day. Every single night you could hear something, like energy, hitting the walls. There were constant tapping sounds. When I first moved in, there was a mirror facing the bed, which I immediately took down. It just felt wrong. The others are moving out of that house next week, and I honestly want to contact the landlord to ask what happened in that room, because everything about it was just too strange.